Morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. This is Two Dads, One Controllers, where we balance our days being the dad in the day and being sweat lords at night. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the MCU, and mostly we're going to be focusing on Iron Man. We'll be kicking things off about the story, what makes all things heroic, and talk about some behind the scenes actions of Iron Man that some of you may not know. So sit tight, get your popcorn, and power up those reactors.
Two dads playing late in the night. Video games, shine neon lights. Control the world, saving the day. Superheroes come out to play.
All right, so to break it all down, this has gone on the MCU for almost 20 years now, starting in 2008, and it all kicked off with Iron Man 2008. So this is kind of a special episode for us as being, big fans. You can't really talk about superhero culture without really getting into the MCU. And I think something that people discount is how much of a gamble Marvel took on this Iron Man movie. So to take it back, kind of in the 90s, like late 90s, some of the superhero films, early 2000s were being made, and a little-known assistant to a producer, Kevin Feige, was on set for a lot of these movies and kind of just taking note and had the real basic thought of, these are great movies, but the one thing that they are missing is that they're not a part of a connected universe. They're all standalones, and they had to be, because at that time, Marvel in the 90s was in deep financial trouble. Comic book boom of the late 80s and early 90s had collapsed. And so in 96, Marvel actually filed for bankruptcy. And to stay afloat, they had to sell off the licenses to a lot of their biggest characters to Hollywood studios. So part of that was X-Men went to 20th Century Fox, Spider-Man went to Sony, Hulk went to Universal, Daredevil, Ghost Rider, and Elektra also went to Fox, and then Blade went to New Line Cinema. So it all kind of started with Blade. It doesn't really get his due with Wesley Snipes. Blade was a great movie to start with. Hugh Jackman with the X-Men movies was also good. They made the Fantastic Four movies. All these characters were having their own standalone movies in these own singular studios. So that's where Feige and others, because he didn't start it on his own, had the thought of, how can we get these characters back and have these movies we can make in one connected shared universe that hadn't really been done before in a live action setting? Because you got to think at the time, like, you can't do a superhero movie without CGI, right? So a lot of this was doing stuff that hadn't been done before or hadn't been done in that way. It's kind of brand new to the market and to the consumer, right? To have these big budget superhero special effects movies. So the one thing I wanted to highlight was that in 2005, in prepping for creating this universe, Marvel made a big deal with Merrill Lynch, securing $525 million in financing. And the catch was, which this is huge, is that if this failed, this deal for the $525 million, to produce 10 live action superhero films with a budget of about $165 million each. And one of the conditions was the movies couldn't go above a PG-13 rating, but Marvel would still retain all of the film-related merchandising revenues, and then Paramount would distribute the titles. And the first film was set to release in summer 2008, which was Iron Man. So in this deal, if they had lost the money, right, or did not see a return, the deal was that they would have to forfeit the rights to 10 Marvel characters that weren't already licensed to other to other studios. So those characters were Captain America, the Avengers, Nick Fury, Black Panther, Ant-Man, Cloak and Dagger, Doctor Strange, Hawkeye, Power Pack, and Shang-Chi. So I think just the big stakes of this, of them losing, because they were already starting with Iron Man, because back then was a B-list character for Marvel. because they'd already sold off all their, X-Men and Spider-Man are probably their two biggest properties, and they'd sold them off by that time. So that's kind of wanted to set the frame for how big of a deal this movie was and is today.
So you're gonna edit this part right here, this little,
Silence.
yeah.
Yeah, we could take that out. I was kind of like coming to an end to see if you had anything you want to throw in.
Oh well, I was about to, but like the way you were going, it seemed kind of hard for me to read. I thought you were like taking a little momentary pause, and then it kept pausing. Kept pausing.
There's no worries. We'll just take it out, and then I'll put some more facts in as we go, but no need for me to just kind of front load it all.
Gotcha. I'll start talking about Iron Man here right now.
All right.
All right, guys. So pretty much Iron Man was pretty much at this point, it was either make or break for the studios and Robert Downey Jr. Little known fact, Robert Downey Jr. at the time was coming off of an addiction, drinking addiction, and stuff like that. And was funny enough in the comics, Tony Stark, he's actually an addict at some point during his time with his step parents. So a little fun fact there. So Iron Man, for those who don't know, I'll just do like an overview, a general breakdown. Iron Man's pretty much, he was captured. He was a weapons arms dealer, got captured, and then he realized this terrorist unit was using his weapons. So pretty much he decided to dedicate his life to fighting for good in terms of stopping people using his weapons as pretty much a tool of mass destruction. Tony Stark's abilities pretty much comes along from his suit, which grants him superhuman strength, durability, unique fighting style with his energy blast, and all of the various numerous technical gadgets that you can possibly think of, between darts and stealth mechanics, anything you can think of, Tony Stark got. But Tony Stark's story kind of follows a redemption arc. If you ever really watch the movie, you notice, like, he's kind of just trying to redeem himself and be responsible. He's kind of viewed as an arrogant asshole, kind of sort of at the beginning, but then he becomes to be still an arrogant kind of asshole, but a more responsible, arrogant person.
It's kind of
Crap,
funny because you say like redemption, and that's kind of like RDJ at the time was trying to restart his career, and it was a big gamble. So Jon Favreau was like the director of this movie, and he was chosen because about the time they were looking for a movie director, Zathura had come out, which was the movie itself didn't do well, but John's first big hit was Elf, which is, a classic now with Will Ferrell.
Yeah.
So they saw that got him greenlit to make Zathura, which was a blend of computer and practical effects that the Marvel really kind of keened in on. It was like, this is what we need for Iron Man. And John, Hollywood rumors go around, and he was plugged in of like, he knew they were looking for a director, and he was interested because he was like, hey, if you ever have Captain America available, let me know. And they're like, hey, not Captain America, but look at this other character we have. Because some people don't remember, I didn't, I'd completely forgotten, but John was already in the Marvel universe, or in a Marvel movie, when he starred with Ben Affleck in Daredevil, and he was Foggy Nelson in Daredevil. So after that, he had a good experience filming it and kind of kept in ties. But circling back to Robert Downey Jr., John had this meeting with RDJ kind of about the character, and RDJ was like all about it. He's like, this is a great opportunity for me. And he knew it. He was like, this is really kind of the direction I want to take for my career. And because Tony Stark is in a redemption arc, John's pitch to the studio hiring, because a lot of these films will get insurance, right? And if this big star cuts out or can't make the film or whatever, they'll make some money back as far as their insurance policy, but no one would insure Robert Downey Jr. because of his past. Like, he was still very volatile in their eyes, and not a guarantee. And they don't like uncertainties. Yeah, risk.
Yeah.
Thank you. They don't like risks back then. So
It's funny to think, like, he was pretty much almost untouched to now. The man grossed over like $14 billion worldwide, making him one of, if not the highest grossing actor of all time.
He's
It's
up
insane to think
there.
about.
It's like Sam Jackson, Harrison Ford, and RDJ, probably. I mean, I'm sure he's at least in the top 10. But just
Yeah.
from those movies alone, really kind of separated him. And at this time, he was 3 years into his personal and professional comeback, but the business was still skeptical about hiring him just because of all the kind of bad press he'd had with his recovery. But despite his recent critical and peer praise, he was in works such as Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which I saw that movie I wasn't a huge fan of.
Tropic Thunder.
Tropic Thunder came out the same year as Iron Man,
Iron Man.
which is hilarious. But he said people come in for those kind of movies or meetings all the time for those type of movies. And I didn't know that RDJ was looked at to play Doctor Doom in 2000s
I would have been wild.
Fantastic Four, which is ironic because now he is Doctor Doom in
Mhm.
this iteration of it. So kind of full circle. But John said he grew up watching him kind of in the 80s and 90s. He felt that he was in a really good place to take on this role. And they were considering people like Clive Owen, who was big back then Timothy Oliphant. And so I think Clive came in and did like a take for a screen test, and it went well. But RDJ was like, I am going to be, because he was an Oscar nominated actor at the time.
Yeah.
And so they don't do screen tests. So the fact that he understood why he was being called in for a screen test, but he welcomed it, was all about it, came to play ball. He was like, I wanted to be in there and have it be the most prepared person, because he's like, preparedness and opportunity, they have to be linked up. If you're not prepared for that opportunity, then you're not going to get it when it comes to you. So that was his mentality when he went into this. And so the story is one of the assistants went out to meet him, right? And he shows up for this screen test to see, and they do in Hollywood, they do screen tests to see, to sell the movie, right? Of
Yeah.
this actor in this movie. And they do it to see if there's chemistry between co-stars, if how hair and makeup, how a character would look in that role, things of that nature. So the assistant goes out there and this Mercedes comes up, and this is a quote: "A Mercedes comes pulling up at 900 miles an hour. It had a dancing hula hoop girl on the dashboard. This huge dude covered in tattoos with a long beard, crazy glasses, and a hat, who's RDJ's right-hand man, Jimmy Rich, gets out, walks around, and opens the door. Inside the depths stepped Robert Downey Jr. in a purple three-piece suit with a giant scarf. He swings the scarf over his shoulder and goes, 'Young man, which way to hair and makeup?' And I was like, holy shit, what just happened?" So after he does this hair and makeup, he arrived on set, and the quote is, he does one take, and the entire crew bursts into applause. Boom, Tony Stark is here. So he pulls up in this E63 Mercedes and just owns it because he'd prepped so much for this. And the fact that it just all went well, and Downey, because they asked Downey, they're like, what do you recall about that screen test? He said, this is a quote, "I saw it recently, it's good, but there was a lot more going on, I think, than just the fact that one day went well. John was looking for a partner, and Kevin was wrestling with the idea. Do you cast against type? Do you make interesting head scratching? Maybe they're onto something, casting decisions." And the result was, Robert Downey. And then once he was signed on to it, Gwyneth Paltrow showed interest. Jeff Bridges showed interest, who is Obadiah's in the film, the big bad. So you had this star power going into this film that really everything started to tie together. So I just thought that was just, the stars had to align for all of it to come out the way that it did. Because there were days when they would show up on set and there was no script for that scene. And Jeff Bridges made the comment, he said it felt like an indie movie because he would show up on a day and the script wasn't finished for that day's shooting. And so John had really encouraged improv on set, and that's what some of the movie scenes were. Even some of the big scenes.
So whenever it comes to, I'm going to probably get us rolling into the MCU because I'm pretty sure that's what everyone's waiting for. Iron Man 1. Let's get rolling on that. So Iron Man 1. What was your favorite takeaway from the first Iron Man?
I was, especially for that time, amazed at how good the film looked of putting a man in a robot suit
Yeah,
and just how
I'm
well
pretty.
that all played together.
I think everyone can probably say everybody's favorite scene, at least my favorite scene, was the scene where he gets shot down by the tank, and then he just gets up. Tank shoots at him. He does like a little side dodge, and he shoots the tank, and this small little tink noise, and he just walks away. Tank in the background explodes.
It was
Whoosh.
sick. It was
Yeah,
sick.
like it was perfect. It was quite literally in my eyes a perfect movie. Like there isn't anything in that movie that I can kind of be like, yeah, that was kind of, you know, like in my eyes, the movie was perfect. Maybe, they obviously had some intermingles with some of the casting and stuff like that, but you know, I think it was just a perfect movie.
I think they had
Mine.
pivotal scenes for it too. I think that Tony Stark had. There were scenes in the movie where you watched it and you were watching Robert Downey and you were just like, that's Tony Stark and then that's Iron Man. So Iron Man, those scenes were the tank scene you just talked about and him
Mhm.
flying with what were those, like F-16s?
The F-22s was chasing
Were
after.
those the Raptors?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when he was flying with the Raptors, that was sick. But I think the Tony Stark scene was him giving, and this was something the script wasn't done for that day for the speech, but the Jericho talking about the missile when he like sold it to it and kind of just the gravitas and the command he had, but also the laid backness that you expect from Tony Stark. I think just
Mhm.
really set the bar for what the movie was.
Yeah. And the movie was amazing. And for those that don't know, whenever I was saying casting issues, I was pretty much talking about Terrence Howard, the old Ronnie, and pretty much what happened was he was just asking for an insane amount of money for his role and trying to kind of be the star of the show when he's not the star of the show, if that makes sense. So
Well,
if any of you guys go ahead.
I say he was the safe bet for that because, in his words, like him and Marvel don't have a good relationship because he, I think he was paid potentially, or no, they promised him with that movie because he also argued he was signed on before Robert was, so he argued for Robert to be on the show. This is Terrence's version of the story. He argued for Robert to be on there, and there was this big promise of he was going to get paid a lot more for the second movie. So then, when the second movie had come around, all that money they promised Terrence, Robert took it. Like they gave it to Robert, and so that's why Terrence is like, "I'm not doing it. Like, what is going on? I'm not doing this movie." And so he like called Robert, who never returned his calls, saying like,
Yeah.
"What's going on?" And then they just replaced Rhodey with Don Cheadle. And so that's kind of the quick summation of that story. But yeah, he kind of, I don't know. I didn't think
And
he was
honest,
right for the role, but
I didn't think so either. But honestly, though, like the way Tony killed it, or sorry, I say Tony. That's how we know he's the perfect actor because I keep calling him Tony when it's Robert. Robert pretty much killed it. Like you had to pay him. He had to be the highest paying actor in the movie. It would be insane to think like you have a sidekick character who's getting paid more than the main characters, and like it didn't make sense. But anywho, away from Terrence Howard, one thing that really impressed me with the movie as well was the pacing. And like I know that's like seems kind of weird to talk about, but it's something that's super easy to overlook, but it's something that can completely destroy your movie. I think the pacing was really well. For example, in Black Panther, the second movie, whenever they introduce Ironheart, which we'll discuss later in time, the pacing for introducing Ironheart in that movie was so fast. You didn't get any character development, and it just turned into I'm great at everything. I have no issues. But with Tony, you got to see he had his own issues and he had to figure out ways to get over those or to overcome them, if you would. And I think the movie wasn't no more than 2 hours. I think it was like an hour and 40 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. But
the
the
first
pacing of
Iron
the,
Man.
yes, pretty sure it was only like an hour and 40 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. But the movie itself was just timeless. Like it's a simple plot, a guy overcoming his issues, and then he's going up against Ironmonger. Ironmonger is was played great. Jeff Bridges, if I'm not Jeff Bridges is his name. He did a great job as Ironmonger. Do you know anything about Jeff Bridges by chance, or it's kind of like one of those?
He's known for these different roles. This was as far as, because I just think of like The Big Lebowski and like kind of these more
Yeah,
chill roles with him. So to see him, I think that, and I'd said this before, that movies are a culmination. There are no great roles, there's great movies. And that quoted Tom Cruise in a previous episode about that. And I think that's where this was going to be a great movie. I think Jon Favreau and team, because there's a whole team that makes these movies with
hmm,
blend of practical and CGI, had a great movie. And then you had all these roles that couldn't go to just anybody. And the fact that RDJ got that role, he made the role great, which made the movie even greater. And I think Jeff Bridges, for the first really MCU villain, did very well. Because a lot of these movies, it's like the evil version of yourself, right? Like that's what he turned into, an evil Iron Man.
yeah,
And then Captain America, is the villain is Red Skull, who also has the super soldier serum. So that's like evil Captain America. And then Thor, Loki, another evil god. So that's where I'm kind of like, your first battle is against kind of the evil version of yourself. Like he is, if you think about it. And that's what he brought to this role. That's what Tony could have been, right? Doing these
mhm,
back deals, selling weapons from the company, just caring about that bottom line. If he continued along that path. But with the realization he had when he was taken by I think they were the 10 Rings, was the name of the terrorist group, by the 10 Rings, he had
that was
this.
the name. That was the name, by the way.
Sweet. I'm pretty proud of myself for coming up with that on the spot. But like seeing the destruction that his weapons did, really, and Obadiah's, Jeff Bridges, was the one that orchestrated that for him to be kidnapped. So you could say that because of the villain, without the villain, we wouldn't have Iron Man, which is kind of a
Yeah,
wild thing to think about.
that is kind of wild to think about. But the thing is, when it comes to villains, one thing that really, not say separated, something that you saw the difference between the two, like obviously Obadiah is a very smart and intelligent individual, but you never really seen him work on his own craft, as opposed to throughout the entirety of the movie, you saw Tony Stark's working on his own craft, like him perfecting his suit and all of the prototypes. But, you saw Obadiah's, you saw him just kind of like commanding these people like, hey, I need you to make this. If you can't do it, I'll find someone who can. Like Tony Stark did this with a box of scraps kind of sort of deal.
Box wraps in a cave.
Yeah, like, so, like, I think it was pretty, like, it's the small things that really, like, the small little details that really kind of forms it, kind of like a stained glass. You see like all of these small little bits and pieces here and there, and eventually all of these stained glasses build one giant picture. And I think it was really good just to see those small nuances and differences between the two and kind of how they carry about themselves.
I
Because
agree
Obadiah is
completely.
selfish.
Like, because if you think about it, you're talking about these small pieces, and that makes a bigger picture. It's, I think, a movie that's difficult to make, like Iron Man, right?
Mhm.
This is an origin story. It's going to begin with him not being Iron Man, and it's going to end with him being Iron Man. Let's fill in the middle and tell the story. Like, it's when he's making the Mark III, right?
Mhm.
And he's sitting there like picking the colors for it. You're sitting there like, we already know what color you're going to pick. But the fact that he kind of glances off into the distance and sees one of his cars and sees the flames on it, and he's just like, yeah,
Hot Rod.
let's go with that. Let's go with Hot Rod Red, I think it was.
Mhm.
It's just like,
I
oh, that's
honestly,
where he got it.
yeah, like I really love the them showing it like all plain, the silver look. Like I love the all silver look. Like I was like, man, like I hope we got to see more runtime of that, but it is what it is.
It
I
was
enjoyed it.
it was yeah, like I said, it was a very, very good movie. I think the action was good. I think the effects were good. especially for the budget. I mean, compared to movies now, I know inflation and whatever, but this movie was made on I think $140 million budget, right?
Hmm.
That's insane. Most of these movies now are, which it depends, right? Because now CGI is cheaper. And if, all right, I'm asking you a little trivia question. If, what movie gave this movie a, kind of a proof of concept as far as think of metallic and moving parts, like transforming parts?
Uh, I will probably say maybe Transformer.
There you go. I tried to put a little bit of a clue in the question. But there was a part
uh,
where John Favreau sat down and watched Transformers because they'd cut out the suit up parts of the movie because it was too expensive for the CGI for Iron Man. But then he
mhm.
sat down and went and saw Transformers and how, I mean, that movie made like 7 or 800 million dollars. And he was
Movies,
like,
right?
all it is just metal moving. Like it was a proof of concept that you can make those metallic surfaces look real with the CGI at that time. So then they went back and those were some of the last things they did was like when they did reshoots, they did the suit up scenes because they're like, Transformers did it. Like we can do it. Cause I think ILM, Industrial Light and Magic is like Disney's, it was created for Star Wars with the episode 4 back in the day,
Yeah,
this special effects studio. And now today are like one of the forefronts of special effects. Anyways, so they did Transformers. So then they brought them in to do these scenes in Iron Man to show more moving parts and stuff like that. So I thought that was
yeah.
really cool.
So that's really where they got it from was Transformers.
The idea of like, this is what people want to see.
Huh. Okay, I honestly didn't know that,
Because they'd
folks.
already filmed when that came
Just so you
out.
know, that was like completely like this man's throwing stuff at me at random. So
Been doing a lot
bear
of
with
reading. A lot of
me.
reading.
So like now that you say that, like I'm gonna segue over to Iron Man 2 because we're starting to talk about the transforming. And then the Monaco scene where he pulls out his suitcase, this little Iron Man suitcase suit. That scene was done really well. Like, and something that like really is also a little undersell is sound design. I think sound design can really sell. And honestly, all of Iron Man's transforming scenes and the suit scenes, and don't get me started with War Machine and Iron Man 2. It's like the sound design also is just top notch, timeless, I would probably say.
It is good, and we'll get more into it because I'm sure we'll do an episode on Iron Man 2. But I will say this about Iron Man 2. For the faults of the story itself, I think the creative choreography of the fighting was done very well. Of
Yeah.
like, I thought it was so cool that he did a flying knee by using the thruster and just shoving his knee like in the robot's face. Like, I thought all that was just so cool.
Yeah. And the only reason I brought up Iron Man 2 is just purely because of the Monaco scene, just when he suits up and you could just like now knowing that he got the I guess not say inspiration for Transformers, like it all makes sense. Like it all makes sense.
Because now I have the direct quote from John Favreau talking about Transformers. He said, seeing Transformers was very helpful because I saw how good ILM now was at doing hard surfaces, was finally convinced that you can achieve photorealism for certain materials. Fortunately, the Iron Man suit was one of them. From budget cuts, I can remember they initially cut out all the stuff where Tony Stark was getting dressed. I was like, guys, look, Transformers making all this money, and all it is things transforming, and we're cutting around it. We're cutting like Superman. Like he goes into the telephone booth and pulls his shirt open, and the next thing you know, he's flying. So that's the end of the quote. I think that's a very interesting comparison for
Yeah.
Superman. Because, I mean, that's the effect it has. Like him suiting up now is, I mean, hell, how many times has he suited up in, that first phase of the MCU?
Yeah.
I mean, people look forward to that, and he gets a new suit, how he suits up, and kind of how the suit evolves over these movies and how more sophisticated. And then they went to nanotech, and I'm
I
not
was
a
just
big
about to
fan of
say.
that.
I'm about to say nanotech is like it's a love hate for me. I love it and I also hate it.
It's just an over
Just
reliance on it.
yeah, it's purely because it just like Spider-Man eventually gets it, and I think nanotech is getting a bit worn out because hell, even Black Panther, uses it too, to an extent.
Well, Black
Uses his
Panther, it looked like developed it. Either him or Tony developed it, or Sherry
Fury
developed it.
developed it, and then they both kind of went different ways with it because Black Panther's nanotech, it morely focused on around kinetic energy. Like whenever his suit kind of stores up the kinetic energy, and then it has that purple kind of hue to it.
Yeah.
Then he uses that kinetic energy to either propel himself, whatever he wants to use it, as opposed to Tony Stark's. Obviously, his nanotech was just more built around keeping him covered, keeping him protected. There wasn't necessarily too much offensive capabilities, with the exception of the freaking beam. But other than that, yeah, I just think the nanotech, it kind of took away like the design. It didn't look as, I don't know how to put it. It's kind of like you're looking at something that you obviously know is really good, but it's boring. I'll
It's
use this for
easy.
example.
It's easy.
Yeah, it's like I don't know if anyone is a car guru. Like when you look at McLaren, like it's a gorgeous car, right? It's gorgeous, but it's boring at the same time. Like everything was made to science, as opposed to you look at a Ferrari or Lamborghini. Lamborghini is like, this is impractical, but we love this. It's extreme. It's, not to say impractical, but it's made with love, if that's the word I'm looking
Which
for.
goes back to Iron Man in the sense that you had this nanotech as the end of the journey, but at the beginning, you remember the icing problem scene where
Yeah.
he physically releases his flaps, where he has like a dial on his hip to release
Yeah.
his flaps to break the ice, like that. The simplicity of it. Which the fun fact about that shot is they wanted this sky battle to happen, right? And then they called it the icing problem, right? It was one of the most complex and narratively clever CGI sequences in the movie, where the Ironmonger battle in the sky. It never existed in the script and was entirely realized through a last second decision to try and improve the sequence in post. There's a lot of like 2 a.m. sessions where they're talking about this stuff, and they're like, we need to fix this gap in the movie. How do we do that? So two of the writers were like off at a movie festival.
Mm-hmm.
So John and the team put a rough cut of the movie on a DVD, and they went to their hotel room, went to their hotel room and like played them the movie. It was like, we need to fix this problem, which they called like a total madhouse, right?
Yeah.
And it took the writers one viewing before they both said the icing problem, which they both gave a confused look, and they laid it out how Tony Stark's high altitude icing problem with the Mark II explained during the test flight, but then it never amounts to anything. There's no payoff to really that being in the movie. So they're saying, how about at the end, Obadiah makes the same mistake that Tony didn't think of, and because this is Obadiah's first suit, where this is Tony's third, it kind of shows him as a learner, kind of learning from himself. And so they do this scene, the CGI for it. It didn't get finished until 3 weeks before the movie was released.
Really?
That is wild.
That's insane. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and you just think of that with all the stress of like, this movie has to work. And it all looks, seeing like all the little intricacies of it, like the further into this story we go with Iron Man as far as the MCU, like the nanotech we were talking about, the more you appreciate like the classic of like when he gets shot and like wings pop out of his forearm, like his gauntlet is like a bullet shield. It's like, like those little things are just, and the way that I talk about Iron Man 2's choreography, one where he just like boosts himself up because the Ironmonger's a bigger suit, boosts himself up just to deck him in the face.
Yeah.
Or how he's creatively, he takes one glove off because he's almost out of power, and then he has to fight with one hand. And it's a beautifully made movie. It was very well done, and it'll be forever one of my favorites, not just because of the nostalgia of it being the first, because it was a very well done movie.
Yeah. It was really well done. The pacing and everything in the movie was great. Like, you didn't felt like you got too little action, but also didn't feel like you got too much action. And trust me, that is a thing. Have too much action. it all played out really well. And one of the scenes, whenever he's saving like the people, he locks onto everyone and then he takes them out in just one fell swoop. Like something quick, simple, boom, easy. Like I just love it.
It's funny
So
because the correlation, I saw this on Instagram the other day of he catches that car in the first movie, right? The car's thrown and Iron Man just catches it in that final fight with the Ironmonger.
yeah.
You flip that, and when he's playing the video to Peter of Peter Parker of him being Spider-Man, the video is of him catching a car. I was like, what? I mean, it might be unrelated and a total coincidence, but even if it's not, like, I just thought that was like kind of a cool thing. But
Yeah, no, yeah, like I get. I never thought about it until you brought that up, and now it all makes sense. It's kind of made me laugh.
which this will tie kind of into the next episode of this series when it does come out. We'll do the Incredible Hulk with Ed Norton, which, funny enough, I'll just give a little snippet of it. This movie was made the same year these movies were being made at the same time
Interesting.
because even though, and people are like, why was Marvel able to make this solo movie when another studio owned it? So Eric Bana was in the 2003 Hulk, right? They
Hmm.
had this is why Sony made so many Spider-Man movies. Per the licensing, they have so long to make a sequel or to at least get it in production, and they never did. So the rights came back to Marvel. So Marvel was like, "All right, we're going to make this." And I think they did it with the studio as well, but made this movie and then signed Ed Norton for it. So that was kind of a big thing for the future, kind of to start out on a big note and kind of add to all the stress too. If you're making these two big movies and have no idea
Yeah.
how it's all going to go. But Iron Man did well, right? It got 102 million in the box office its opening weekend and went on to start this amazing kind of cinematic universe that led to dozens and dozens of movies since then, and all founded on this kind of foundation.
Yeah. Shoot. Well, folks, I think that's going to be it for us. Well, get ready to stay tuned for obviously we said we're going to be talking about the Hulk next. So if you guys ever get the chance, email us, reach out to us, and we'll have our emails in the description, ways to reach out for any possible episodes that you want to see. All right. Anything for you?
I say, till next time, we appreciate you guys kind of joining us with this journey. Let us know what Perry said, kind of what you guys want to hear. You'll be hearing a lot more from Perry in the coming episodes. So yeah, interact with us, stay tuned, and we've got some exciting stuff in the works for you. So till next time, see ya.
All right. See ya.